Enemy power-up detected.
This is Incoming Missile, a MechWarrior Online podcast. Alright mech fans, welcome to another installment of your favourite MechWarrior podcast. Time to take a break from using your rack macros and stacking your favourite mech with targeting computers. Because today we are bringing you episode number 10, which is the second part in our Year in Review series, where we have a look back at 2018 and cast a critical MechWarrior eye over what happened. If you did miss episode 9, go back and have a listen to that now. Capn and I went over the mech packs that had been released in 2018 and gave you our take and our thoughts on what those mech packs were like. In this episode, we're shifting our focus to the changes that were made to the game in 2018. We have trawled through each of the monthly patch notes, and what we've tried to do is get an idea about the types of changes and any patterns or trends that we identified from what had been changed. The thing that we really wanted to look at was what those changes could tell us about the direction that the game was going in, and maybe what we could expect from the game moving forward in 2019. It's not a play-by-play of the specific quirks or adjustments, the specific changes that were made to certain mechs, but it's a look at the changes that PGI made over the year and what that might mean for the state of the game, both at the moment and I guess moving forward. Now, there are a couple of particularly interesting topics that we will touch on today, but that we don't go into depth about and elaborate, and that's just because we plan on doing future episodes where we do zoom in and do a deep dive on those. So, for example, with the amount of tuning that's going on with LRMs at the moment, and given how much Captain Cat does like to play them, even though he won't admit to it, we're going to do a whole episode on LRMs and looking at whether they are the issue that we think they are or that people think they are, and whether the changes that are being rolled out is addressing those things that are perceived as an issue. I would like to say thank you to everyone who took the time to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to leave a comment and qualify for the giveaway that we had with episode 9. Yes, you are in the draw to win a mech pack if you commented, and no, it is not rigged. If you did leave a comment, then go back to the channel now and you should see the giveaway video that will announce who has won that mech pack. If that was you that won, be sure to email us and tell us your preference for a mech pack and your in-game pilot name. So congratulations to the winner, and thank you to everyone that did leave a comment. Shouts out to Jill Vader, who says she loves our Kiwi accents. Jill, you are obviously not an Australian, which is probably a good thing. Welcome to DePsycho Kitty, who says they recently started playing MechWarrior. Hope you are enjoying the game, and welcome to the community. Also, thank you to Steve Blanca, Floyd Foster, and Dhruv Ang for your kind words and comments. So for Dhruv and anyone else that commented but you didn't win the mech pack, do flick us an email at incomingmissilepodcast@gmail.com, and we do have a 3-day premium time code for you. Now, we're all about the conversation here at Incoming Missile Podcast, and we want to keep chatting about the different aspects of the game that we and you find interesting. Remember, if there is something that you'd like to talk to us about, whether it's suggestions about episodes or anything about what we have talked about, make sure to get a hold of us via our various channels. The email address that I've announced already. Follow us on Twitter, that's at IncomingP, and of course subscribe to the podcast at your favourite podcast platform, whether that be iTunes, Castbox, or whatever you listen to. Alright, time for today's episode. So, Captain Cat has gone ahead and trawled through all of the patch notes from 2018, so well done, Captain Cat. Now, He has done that so that you guys don't have to. And of course, what we wanted to do was run a discerning eye over those changes in the patch notes so that we could chat to you guys about what those changes might have meant. And there's a couple of key questions that we want to get to, as we've touched in the intro, around what those changes might tell us about the direction of the game and in particular maybe the future of MWO. But before we do that, we thought it was probably a good idea to maybe just look over those changes and give a bit of a summary of what we saw and kind of some major developments, major events that have gone through. So let's kick over to Capn Cat that knows all about
it. The discerning eye. Obviously why you chose me. All right. So vaguely chronologically, and this is just the major stuff. I'm not going to go obviously into every little detail of every patch, but the ones that I'd pick out as being important from last year, good or bad. First, we had the rate of heat loss quirks on the light mechs, which converted to heat dissipation quirks. You might remember that they had those quirks that actually did nothing. So the lights got a little bit of a love right at the start of the year, which was nice. We saw the rise of ballistics. We had machine guns, heavy Gauss rifles, LBX, AC, especially AC2s, seemed to sort of get better and better throughout the year. We had consumables. First, the airstrikes got nerfed back, which was kind of good, I reckon. It put some reason to use artillery. Now I carry one of each, fire it off, depending on the situation. And the cool shot nerf, so you got to be a little bit more proactive with those cool shots if you see you're going to go over. Probably one of the biggest introductions of 2018 was Solaris 7, which started big noise and kind of has tapered off. But we've seen a lot of, what interests me more, we've seen a lot of balance changes being made based on Solaris. Obviously, the Annihilators getting pulled back a bit and AC2s getting pulled back a bit and that sort of thing. We saw a nearly endless cycle of changes for LRMs, which managed to annoy just about everyone, I think. Like, whether you were pro or anti-LRM, they sort of went one way and then they went the other way and then nobody was really happy. They say that, what is it, the symptom of a good compromise is that nobody's happy, so...
Then it's working well. LRMs are working really well.
Yay, nobody's happy. So I would put in the same category as that we saw ECM buffs twice in the year. I think there was two, extending their range back out to where it used to be back in the old days, that sort of thing. We saw introduction of a lot of key mechs that carried ECM, the Fafnirs, Blood Asps, that new Nightjar, Fleas, also the Sun Spider, Black Lantern, and Haramoto Chi, all sporting ECM, just bringing that little bit more shielding onto the battlefield. One big little change was the build importing and skill tree importing, exporting, and being able to jump with those into the testing grounds and give them a play. We've got stock mode. But and perhaps more interesting for us, that the balance tuning that led to of the stock mechs and also the loadouts that they had, those kind of weapons, how they all got more ammo and things like that. A really big one, probably second only to Solaris, was the heat system overhaul. We went through obviously a series of PTSs, PTS 1, 1.1, and 2, and then into the game. And, props to PGI. At PTS 1, it wasn't good, and by the time they put it in the game, it was good. So I think somehow that it worked out with a really good result. We're moving on. We got the introduction of the HSL quirk type, which is the one that means that you can exceed the ghost heat limit of those weapon types on those particular mechs, which is really nice and flavorful, and I'd like to see it become more far-reaching and more widely used. But yeah, that was a great one, and I think universally liked. The micro and small laser ghost heat group change up, and which gave us a lot more options on the battlefield, how you could combine those weapons with others. And then we got series really of wide-ranging mobility buffs across, I think, 4 months at the end of the year and including into the start of this year. Whether they were enough is another question. And then finally, we got the stealth changes and the dreaded side torso destruction rework. That's been the bane of my life since its introduction.
It's been one that's was controversial.
And last but certainly not least was that awesome friends list refresh button, which did nothing. Okay, so not that. The faction play queue numbers have really been a great quality of life improvement for our unit, being able to see if it's worth searching or not, or whether the group sizes that we have are going to work in with what's already there. It's such a small thing, but it's made a huge difference to us. That's 2018, as I see it.
And look, there's so much there that you've gone over, Capn, and I guess probably the key thing that we wanted to do in the podcast today is give you that overview and give you that summary of what those changes were. But probably what's most important is what does it mean? And that's kind of the thing that we wanted to talk about today and say we have seen all of those changes month by month. There's been things that have been introduced, small and big. But what does that tell us about where the game's going, and what future does MechWarrior have based on those changes that we've seen? All right, well, let's talk about maybe what we think, and just a quick note. Of course, you can go back if you are mech nerds and grog nerds like us. You can go back and check out those patch notes, which is obviously exactly what that we've done and gone back and seen in detail what those changes were. Yeah, let's talk about maybe what we think the changes told us about the direction of the game, and I'll kick us off, Capn, and keen to hear your thoughts on this one. But I see 2018 firstly as the year of heat. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we saw and a lot of the major changes either directly involved the heat mechanic or inadvertently involved the heat mechanic. And it seemed to me from the changes that were made that heat seems to be one of the main ways that they're looking to achieve balance. So it's a relatively small investment, I guess, from PGI's behalf, but it allows them to tweak or tune in the direction that they want to go. So we saw the heat system overhaul that you talked about, which involved PTS. We talked about the pretty controversial side torso distraction, which again is one of those ones that's related directly and indirectly to heat. But there's
cool shots.
There's other related ones. Ballistics being buffed is probably inadvertently another move towards heat, because you got a weapon system that runs on relatively heat neutral. So I mean, do you agree? And if you do, what do you think this focus on heat does to the meta, to the direction of the game if we're looking forward to 2019?
Yeah, I'd agree with you there that it's if you were going to sum up all those little changes throughout the year onto one thing, you could pick probably heat as being the one most common factor of it all. And it really has seen laser vomit kind of fade a little bit into the background. It's still there, but we've got a bunch of other weapon systems and things being used, particularly ballistics, as a counterpoint to that. Unfortunately for clans, it kind of removed one of their only remaining really good weapon systems. But, clans, to me, clans will always be superior weapons, and Innisphere will always be superior durability, and that is just personal taste thing, I guess. That's how I see the two playing out. But it really does feel like clans have got little bit of the short shrift on the balance changes this year.
Do you think, Capn, that the aggregated change that we see, do you think it's a deliberate move to bringing parity to clans and IS? Because I think that's one thing that we'll see when we talk about the direction. We'll see a couple of themes coming through, and I do think that one of the themes that we're seeing is the parity between clan and IS, and some of these changes are ways to try and achieve that. Do you think that the heat stuff is pretty much related almost directly to clans and pretty much directly to the laser vom meta?
You could say it was explicitly said that that's what those PTSs were about, was ending that sort of clan alpha vomit dominance. So yeah, I think it was pretty clear that clans were the specific target of those changes, and Innisphere laser vomit has never been anything much against clan laser vomit, so it's kind of fair enough, I guess, that they would need some love there if that was your key goal, was to find a balance between those two forces. But remembering that in large chunks of the game, clans and Innispheres are playing together.
Obviously, they've addressed heat and they've made a lot of changes towards heat, so they've seen it as an issue, and they're looking to correct it, I guess, back to where they want it to be. Do you think that we're going to see a new meta, or have they done enough to put clan lasers where they need to be?
That is a very big question. I think if you asked a bunch of knowledgeable people, you get a bunch of knowledgeable answers that didn't agree with each other, to be honest. But the short answer is that we've already seen a shift in the meta, like you alluded to, and that was to, I think, a big part of that was Solaris, where AC2 spam became very, very powerful there, like pretty much unstoppable. And that kind of bled out into other parts of the game, where you now see AC2 spam being used quite regularly throughout the game. Things like quad LBX mechs and heavy course mechs, of course, came to the fore throughout the year as they were also buffed. So in short, I think we've already seen a quite decisive shift in the meta, and meta it's kind of almost an organic process where people start using something and then it kind of catches on, and then maybe someone comes up with something that's better than that, and that catches on, and then it just keeps shifting and moving. Even if we weren't making balance changes, I think that the product of one large balance change like that heat change takes a while to play out to its full, where people are sort of discovering things even now.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked before about the fact that meta does need to shift. You want people to experience those other weapon systems if they're not using them, and we don't want people to just have to go to Laser Vom or Clan Laser Vom if they want to win or compete. I guess my question, though, is that it very much seems as though there's been a deliberate push towards putting heat in a certain place, and I guess maybe a couple of themes obviously are parity for clans over IS. So to maybe reduce the effectiveness of clan weapons. It also seems as though they want to push maybe DPS related builds over, the Alpha, the Burst, those high kind of bogey mechs, the Death Strike type bogey mech that we've talked about previously. Is there anything else that they're trying to do with heat? Are they trying to shift the meta in a certain direction? Is it towards ballistics? What type of playstyle is it towards if they've done all these changes towards heat?
To be honest, I'm not sure whether they make the changes with an intention that people will move to certain weapon types so much as just trying to get... I mean, to me, my assumption would be that they're trying to get the weapons that are overperforming down to be on a similar level to the other weapon options available, rather than trying to push people to use certain kind of weapons. That might be naive. It kind of, I guess what you're saying implies that you think differently, which is very interesting to me.
I think that's a good insight that you're having. You're saying that what we've seen is about balance primarily. So they're not trying to drive a direction per se, but that they're trying to achieve balance, and that they're looking at over and underperforming and trying to get it in that happy medium. So I mean, do you think that these heat changes were a correction rather than a steer in a different direction?
Yeah, I do. And I think that as a developer, it would require some pretty intense crystal ball gazing to know how the player base, in a game like this, where there's so many options of ways that you can react to a change. You can move mechs, you can move weapons, you can move this and that and the other. There's a million components of making a mech the way you want it in this game, and so many combinations that it would be very hard to predict, I think, how those changes might flow on. And so my instinct would be not to worry too much about that, and just to worry about whether those weapons are performing on a sort of a par with each other. And I would say that they've been very successful in that. If you look at the year as a whole, we've come from a picture where Laser Vomit really was very dominant at the start of the year. How much of that was sort of zeitgeist and popularity, and how much of it was the actual values in the game, is a little less easy to grab onto, because it's almost like people just follow and find things and learn from other people. So maybe the AC2s were already a powerhouse, but people just weren't using them. Certainly they did get buffed throughout the year, but not a massive amount. But by the end of the year, and right now, I would say that you actually have a really good amount of options in this game of what you can go out and play and do well with. ACs are good, like we've said, and LBX is included in that. Machine guns are good. Laser Vomit is still good. Gorse Vomit is still good. Whatever else you want to say, streaks have just been buffed. If you want to go out and run those, I'd say
LRMs are awesome.
LRMs are so good. No, I honestly, I can't really comment on whether LRMs are good or not, because I'm only ever the victim of them.
I want you to reflect on what you're saying here, though, Cap, because this is probably an important point that maybe, and I'm not talking about LRMs, but an important point, because if we go back a year, and would that same statement hold true where you talk about those other weapon systems being in a good place? Because if it wasn't, if back then they weren't in a good place, and we're here now in 2019, we look at the changes in 2018, and we see what they've done with heat, and that has helped result in these other weapon systems being more viable, and whether that's simply through the mechanics and the value changes, that they actually have a value that's equal to clan laser vom, or it's because it's forced people, or it's encouraged people to utilize those other builds, and people realize that they are cool. Isn't that a good thing? Doesn't that mean that PGI have done well, balance-wise?
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly what I said, that I think they've done a really good job of, maybe I didn't say it loudly enough, I think they've done a very good job of providing players with a lot more options than they had at the start of the year. By the end of the year, SRMs are still a bit funny. They maybe don't reg exactly right, but apart from those, I mean, even small lasers and micro lasers and that sort of thing are worth using now. There's a few things maybe that I'd pick out that light PPCs, things like that maybe it's just still not really worth it. But apart from that, I think nearly all the weapon systems in the game are usable, at least in quick play.
Because that's potentially a controversial statement. I mean, and look, the reason I say it is because there's a definitive skill difference between you and me. And I'm at a skill level where sometimes the meta doesn't matter as much to me because I'm not good enough to take advantage of it, right? So I can still maybe have fun with a weapon system that wasn't that great because what I'm getting out of the game might be different. But for yourself and for some of the commentators that we see on Reddit and the forums that are really skilled players, they get frustrated because they see these inequities and that kind of thing. You, as a very good player, does that mean that you're experiencing that with those weapon systems, that you believe a high-skilled player, like, say, Just Call Me Ash would call himself, a top-tier player, they're getting the best out of those weapon systems and they're viable for that group as well?
There's still a little bit of deficit in the performance of certain play styles. Like brawling is still a pretty tricky enterprise or undertaking, purely because you have to cross open ground and there's people and getting close to people, and there's people who can put you down very fast with a lot of damage very quickly when you do manage to close to range. And so there's almost some other issues there, but those kind of builds have also been buffed throughout the year because you were able to sustain a higher DPS like you spoke about before, long term, because your heat dissipates so fast now that you can, in those kind of brawling builds, get in there and just keep, if you've got a DPS focused build, you can keep DPSing for a lot longer than you could before. So I think things are in a good place. They're not in a perfect place. There's still every reason for people to think that things could be better, but I think on the other hand, things are better than they were at the start of last year.
Yeah, and that's an important point, is it? That whether it is where it needs to be is a different question from whether it's got better. And I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think the points you've made are really good, that those other weapon systems are now viable, and the changes to heat have ultimately been pretty positive for that aspect of it. So talk to me then, Kat, because you understand this, I think, pretty well. How then at the end of the year, after you've made some positive heat changes, how then do you introduce the side torso destruction, which I don't know if I've heard anyone say that that's been a good move? Why not hit the button and roll that back right away? Where does that fit into the 2018 positive heat changes that we saw?
I mean, to discuss this, we'd have to discuss the sort of press release that went along with it, which was that it was to fix the heat bug. If you guys haven't seen it, occasionally it's fairly common. There's a bug that comes up where your mech just doesn't seem to dissipate heat for some reason in some games, and it won't be everyone in that game. It'll just be a few people. But the reason for that side torso change, as stated in the patch notes at least, was that it was supposedly a fix for that bug. However, the bug still exists in the game. I've seen it myself. So it doesn't, even if it has solved some aspects of that problem, it hasn't solved it outright. And then you can look at it on a deeper level and wonder whether that was a change that, at least theorize whether that was a change that PGI wanted to make, and they used the bug as a sort of a rationale to make that change. It's not good. And I've heard Phil at least talking to Ash about rolling that change back. So maybe it's still in the works.
Yeah, we've pretty much come to the conclusion that the direction that they've taken in 2018 with heat has been a good one. So let's hope, that they continue along that line and see that maybe the disease was better than the cure in this instance, and going back to what it was is better.
Well, looking across all the patch notes, if you go back as we both did and look through all the patch notes and sort of itemize every change that got made, you'll see that there was plenty of missteps. There was plenty of things that got put in the game and then immediately sort of either rolled back or changed, or plenty of things that got buffed and then buffed and then buffed and still were just okay. Not every step on the path has been perfect and right and great, but overall, from one end of the year to the next, I'd say we improved on the balanced state of the game in terms of what weapons you could bring, what options players had of how they wanted to play.
Right, so we've covered Heat, and I definitely think Heat was one of the themes, the change themes that we saw over 2018. One of the other things that I thought was evident from the types of changes that we saw was that it was focused on small change, and there wasn't big changes that were made or tackled to address balance or maybe some of those other things with the game that might need to be changed. And what I'm saying there is that PGI seem to be aiming for 3 key goals, as far as I can tell. Suitable time to kill, so TTK being in a place that they find reasonable, and that there is parity across the factions, IS and Clan, and that there's parity across the classes. And I think we saw just small changes that did what you were saying before, Kat, around just a balance process. You know, rather than trying to steer in a direction, trying to bite off something big like PSR or a revamp of mobility or something like that, we just saw these little tweaks of mechs and weapon systems and stuff like that, what PGI called tuning. And so if anything had kind of strayed off the pathway of, you know, good TTK, parity between factions, parity between classes, we saw tweaks, and those tweaks were most often in the form of adjustments to cooldown, heat, as we've covered obviously, but cooldown, range, some of those weapon things up and down. And we did see a lot of quirk conversion, so armor being converted to structure or vice versa, local quirks being converted to global quirks. You know, you might have had 10% cooldown for ballistic and that got converted to 10% to all weapon types and those kind of things. So it really just seemed keeping things within that balanced picture, and we didn't see big changes, or they didn't want to be bitten off. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the MO for the PGI changes in general. And then all of a sudden they'll shock us with some massive change to how something works, and everybody has to find their feet again. But like the heat change was, I think people really weren't sure if they liked it when it first came out. I don't know, but I think generally people agree that it was an improvement by now. But anyway, on those small values, I mean, I've hypothesized before that PGI are a bit sort of gun shy, maybe, about making large changes and then having to roll them back because of people obviously don't like things to be taken away when they were good. So maybe, maybe their philosophy is that it's better to make small incremental changes until something's where it needs to be. And then rather than making one large change and then devaluing it later, or vice versa, nerfing something really too hard and then bring it back up.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and you probably said it right there, that that's kind of their philosophy towards balance, to avoid major changes. And, one of the things that I had written down here is that not only could it be their philosophy towards balance in those small changes and see the results and then tweak and tune and those kind of things, but 2018, I think, probably more than any year that we've had so far, there was just a limit to the amount of resource that they could put towards it. So I think the fact that the bulk of the resource has probably gone to Solaris, and then once Solaris was launched, we're probably then putting some of that resource towards, mercenaries, MechWarrior 5, and so, they really didn't have the people on hand to be able to make those major things. I mean, as I said, we talk a lot about PSR, and we've advocated for the role that might play, but I just don't think that they've got the resource there. And the changes that we saw were all pretty small, you know what I mean? That they added up after a while, but anything to do with mechs or weapon systems and all that kind of stuff, it was all tweaking up and down. And my worry, and I guess my question to you is, you talked about the fact that LRMs, we joked about the fact that it's kind of gone around in circles a little bit. Are we seeing a little bit of going around in circles, that it's tweak up and then tweak down, tweak up and tweak down, and we don't really get anywhere?
Yeah, I think to some extent that's true. It certainly seems like PGI often put a change in the game that anyone could have told them wasn't going to make that weapon worth using, or wasn't going to fix whatever problem that mech had for that is stopping people from using it. So that means the next month we see another buff, and then the next month we see another buff, and then and then like we saw in this year with LRMs, we see some major changes getting made where it actually starts putting them kind of where they need to be.
The fact that we just saw small changes in 2018, does that mean that we're not going to see big changes, or we shouldn't expect big changes? Is that the direction that they've gone in?
I've got a bit of a catspiracy for you there.
Ooh.
Which I guess you could say, which is the Solaris game mode. I mean, one reading of that being prioritized and put a lot of dev time into, and now even still now being pushed quite hard, is clearly a way that this game can survive with a more limited population, right? Because, you only need to find one other person to be able to get a game, maybe two. However, that fell quite short of expectations, I think, in terms of, it was cool for a little while. Then people kind of got bored of it. They got bored of sitting in queues waiting, kind of snowballed. People realized that they actually didn't like getting wrecked, especially when you can't blame your team. But you'd go up against someone who would just dominate you, and then you'd go back to the queue, they dominate you again. You look at the queue, there's one person sitting there. Well, maybe people aren't going to search the next time, Off the back of that, we did see a little bit of a downturn in sort of major content releases for MechWarrior Online. So maybe you could say that they're just not seeing the return on investment opportunities for MechWarrior Online, that if they put in those 1,000 hours of man hours on whatever feature, that they'll get that money back.
It's a really good point. I mean, that's not too tinfoil hat. I mean, that could just be simple business. I mean, if you do another Solaris, and again, that doesn't land, then yeah, potentially that's all that resource and there's all that effort. If it's not quite lost, then maybe you're at least not getting the initial return on it that you wanted. But what does that mean then moving forward into 2019 if the game isn't in the place where it needs to be, or if it could be substantially better? Does it need big changes? Does it need a PSR overhaul? Does it need a Solaris level investment in?
Well, without being able to see the numbers, that's pretty hard to call, isn't it? As a player of the game, you'd definitely make one call. Yes, you should keep pumping content and investment into this game because I want that. But if you were the financial officer at PGI, would you make that same call with all the figures in front of you? I don't know. I think that personally, if you're asking just my opinion, then I think that PGI still have a couple of easy opportunities that they could bite on to potentially somewhat revitalize the game for limited investment. I think Solaris actually does have a future if it just needs a little bit more pumped into it. You got to take a little bit more risk of putting a little bit more time in there and just addressing some of those issues that I was talking about before, about how people are searching in queues and getting bored or getting wrecked by the same people again and again, that sort of thing. I know that faction play is getting talked about quite a lot with Paul, so potentially PGI see that as an avenue for the game going forward.
The talk around faction play, I guess, supports your point a little bit more as well there, that they've stated that there's a limited amount of resource, there's some major things that they can't and won't do. So that kind of further supports this idea of not making bigger changes because at the moment it's not worth the return on investment. Yeah, that's a really good perspective. Again, those small changes, whereas maybe they don't make big shifts, and maybe there's still some stuff to be done, it makes perfect sense that they don't bite off big changes, A, because there's maybe not going to be that return on investment that they would like, and B, there's probably a lack of resource because they are a relatively small studio, and it'll be all guns blazing to get mercenaries out by September this year.
Yeah, and C or B2 perhaps. They're looking down the barrel of a large financial outlay for getting MechWarrior 5 mercenaries out, and by no means success is certain on anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we saw a lot of work with heat, and we did see a lot of small changes and not necessarily big things bitten off. The other thing that I thought, or the other pattern that I think that I picked up from the types of changes that we had seen, is that I don't think PGI think that there is parity between IS and Clan. I do think we saw a lot of IS-centric changes, a lot of work to bring IS up. It seems as though that's still an ongoing project. The majority of the quirk changes that we saw, as I said, were IS mechs, and the heat stuff itself seemed to be aimed pretty directly at clans and clan laser vomit. So, was that something that you think that you picked up? What do you think the changes told us about how PGI feel, that parity stuff is going in Time to Kill?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd sort of to make a little point of order there that they weren't so much bringing IS up as much as they were bringing Clan down a lot of the time,
Yeah, nice.
especially in the first half of the year, that it was really about reducing the capabilities of Clan to do some nasty stuff, whether that was justified or not. But yeah, as a person who plays faction play quite regularly, I would say that the current IS versus Clans balance is not in a terrible place, but I actually find IS to be a little bit more easygoing than Clans these days. Clans are quite flaky and weak. You can just, if you bring 12 Annihilators, it's going to, in push, it's going to be really hard for the Clans to stop you with anything from their arsenal. It is an extreme example of that. You can, across the board, that's true. You could bring 12 Assassins and carve up most Clan decks.
So do you think that the work that we saw in 2018 to bring clans down a little bit, or maybe even to specialize clans a little bit more, because kind of what I got from your statement there was that clans are maybe a little bit more glass cannon-y, or some of the play styles that they were able to take advantage of, the trade stuff and all of that the effectiveness of that has been reduced. Do you think, again, if we were to rewind to a year ago, do you think those changes have overall been a good thing?
No, I think that actually falls a little bit short of where it could have been. I like that Innisphere are, able to handle themselves versus Clan. That much is good. But I think Clan have really had their options limited pretty hard of what, available builds and things they can do, which is not what I'm for. I'd rather that, just like on the Innisphere side, there was a bunch of options about what I could do with my Clan mechs. It was kind of, Laser Vomit was really the last bastion of Clan superiority. And look, there's still some monsters on the Clan side for sure. However, overall, I think that I'd rather that the Clans got a little bit of love. Maybe that's a conscious decision, that the shine is kind of wearing off the Clan side now. We had the Clan invasion way back when, and they're all shiny and new, and now PGI want to see a resurgence of Innisphere, and certainly we've seen some decent Innisphere mechs this year, and Clan.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the bastion of Clan superiority, I like that phrase. But I guess the risk in some of the changes that we had seen, I'm a little bit worried that they're going to lose some of the unique asymmetry in the balance. You talked before about Ice being tanky and Clan having the weapon advantage. The risk if and with some of the changes, I think we're starting to get into an area where the lines are getting blurred a little bit. And as you say, if you take away some of the playstyle options for Clan and make it not unplayable, but obviously not a choice you're going to take, you are maybe mucking around with that asymmetry, I think, which is a good thing. If you had Clan tech providing a distinct advantage and Clan mechs tending to be more glass cannons, IS not having the weapon advantage, but having that armor advantage. It's for me, with the changes that have been made, I just get the impression that PGI still don't think there's parity there, and there is some risk that if they continue down that pathway, maybe some of that asymmetry's lost.
Yeah, and that asymmetry is one of the major reasons why I love this game. There's all of these mechs in the game, and yet so many of them have something unique and flavorful about them. And that's one of the major ones, is the difference between Clan and IS. And we've got to retain that.
Nice. All right, well, those are some things that we think the changes told us about what PGI were up to and maybe what they were heading for. It's pretty interesting, I think, to now view those changes through the lens of what does it tell us about the future of the game. So I'm going to kick this to you, Capn Cat. From what we have seen in 2018, what are some key things that you think that tells us about the future of the game, the meta, MechWarrior itself as a title?
I think we've already talked about it, that the development that'll be going into MechWarrior Online for the remainder of the year and leading up to the MechWarrior 5 launch is by no means certain. I mean, hopefully we'll get an announcement any day now about those new maps or the new old maps. That'll be really great. Hopefully there's not too many gotchas in that, getting that work done. But yeah, beyond that, we're not really looking forward to anything major at this point. The state of play, state of balance is not terrible. We can keep tweaking those, trying to get to something where all weapons everywhere in all spheres of the game are usable. But yeah, there's not a lot to look forward to that we know of.
I mean, I think we can sum that up by saying that I don't think we can expect any major revamps in this coming year. I think there will be stuff added, but I don't think they'll bite off anything too major. And I think that's been signaled too by, the talk around faction play and stating unequivocally that there's only so much that they can do. I think that's going to flow to those other areas. Solaris maybe didn't necessarily land in the way that they wanted it to, or maybe even the players wanted it to, but I don't think that they're going to bite off anything big. So I think the small tweaks that we've seen in 2018, I think that's probably just going to continue into 2019. I think we're going to get the same, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we've talked about the fact that we probably both think they've done actually a pretty good job in 2018 with the changes that they put in place. But it does beg the question that if we have some of these major things that we think need to be addressed, like PSR or mobility, or maybe some of these other areas, I don't think that we're going to see that before Mercenaries come out.
I gotta chuck in at this point. My feelings around Solaris, since we've mentioned it a few times, I really think that there's one tiny change that PGI could make with the amount of development reserves they have that would make Solaris just so much better, and that is actually restricting a lot more the time that you could play it. They run it for 3 months or whatever. They need to take it down to something like 1 week a month where you play that, and they need to make it way more visible when there's people in the queues, because at the moment it's got the snowball effect where you sit in the queue, you don't find a game, you give up, you try it again, same result. Well, people aren't going to keep coming back and trying that. But if you restricted the amount of time that people could play that game mode, you made it more like a tournament. So it was, happening at a certain time of the month. It's Solaris Week, and then you funnel the players in by showing them on their home screen that there are people in. There's one person in Div 1, there's 3 people in Div 2, etc. That you'll get a lot more efficiency out of how those queues are being used. I think it'll revitalize that game mode a lot, because for me, a lot of what holds it back is that hanging around in queue.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think the biggest failing for Solaris is the fact that it just hasn't. There's not the hook there to want to go and play and keep playing, and treating it like an event, for lack of a better word, is a brilliant idea. But let me ask you this, Capn. Do you think we will see changes to Solaris in 2019 from what you had seen and then what they've done thus far? What do you think they'll do with Solaris?
Yeah, well, it seems like from January at least, and going into February, it seems like they're planning on just incentivizing it a little bit more, obviously, with the events, having the carrot out for the running an event at the same time as Solaris runs. They're running it, for a whole month this time, that if you do your X number of games, you get stuff.
Solaris needs some hype, eh? It's the product where it's good, it's fun, it's a decent product, but people just don't want to buy it. They don't want to engage in it. There needs to be some hype, there needs to be some reason. And yeah, I don't know whether 2019 would be the year where they're going to tackle, making it the product, I guess, that they originally wanted it to be. All right, so Solaris aside, the thing I'm keen to hear your thoughts on, Capn, is where you see the future of MechWarrior as a game based on what we saw in 2018. What do you think the changes tell us about the existence of MechWarrior Online?
For now, it just looks like we're in a bit of a holding pattern, kind of like what you've already said. I think things are kind of up in the air, waiting on to see how MechWarrior 5 pans out. PGI won't be, I think, too willing to risk too much until that's in bed. I made no secret about the fact that I was really hoping for a MechWarrior Online 2 announcement at MechCon last year, because I just wanted to be secure in the knowledge that, there was sort of a bright light in the future for this game, and we would move to a new engine and and that sort of thing. But for the meantime, I think we're not going to get that at the very soonest. I think we'd hear something about that on MechCon 2019, and theoretically not even then.
Yeah, look, I think there's been some end of the worlders out there that have talked about art, particularly post MechCon. That the lack of content reflected that it was the deaths knell for MechWarrior Online. But like, I tend to agree with you. I think what we have seen has been small, manageable change in a direction, but mostly just to keep things balanced, and that we're in a holding pattern. You're talking about a small studio, and you can't be developing MechWarrior Online 2 or making big changes to the game whilst you're also trying to develop up that title in Mercenaries 5. So yeah, I mean, I think we will continue to see in 2019 the same level and types of changes that we've seen in 2018, but it signals for me that we're in that holding pattern. Hopefully when we're doing this again next year, then we're seeing some major announcements, and we're confirmed as being exactly right and everything that we've said. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it signaled the deaths now. That's probably the best thing that I could say. I think what the changes in 2018 told us about the future of the game was that MechWarrior Online 2 is on the horizon.
To be honest, it's a little bit of a grim picture that we're painting here. There's no hope for major announcements this year. Well, maybe that's true. Hopefully there's a few little Easter eggs and fun little road bumps along the way. But I don't think that PGI are planning for this game to go down the gurgler anytime soon. And that the patch notes, really bear that out. I mean, every month we're getting new bolt-ons for all the new mechs in the game. We're getting weapon retrofits for ancient mechs. Like, why would a studio be giving someone the task, paying someone to go through and retrofit all those mechs with the new weapons if they didn't think the game had a future? They're not going to make any money out of that job. It's purely for future proofing. And there's a bunch of stuff like that you could pull out of the patch notes that it just makes no sense for them to be investing stuff that has no immediate reward monetarily for them. And the only rational explanation for it is that they're still working on this game. They still want this game to be successful, and they still want it to be finished, I guess, at some undefinable point in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the probably the most obvious point is that having all this full-time resource and the people doing what we've said is actually some pretty good work over 2018. It makes more sense. The rule of parsimony, it makes more sense that the simplest explanation is the right one, and that there's a future for the game. All right, dude, let's finish up by maybe just touching on a few of your favourites, some awards or some highlights for us and the changes that were made. Obviously, we talked about the mech packs that were released and what our favourites were there. Let's talk a little bit about some of the favourite changes that we saw. So you've called it the Alpha Strike Award. So what was your Alpha Strike Award for the favourite change of 2018?
So Alpha Strike Award is for my favourite change, and that's just a personal favourite, I guess, of mine, and that is that HSL Ghost Heat quirk that was put into the game this year. And that's really the reason I love it, is because it's indicative of a bright future for quirks and flavorful quirks in this game. So maybe so far we haven't seen the depth of potential in that idea fully explored. There's just been a few sort of mechs here and there. I've really been loving, we're talking about 2019 patches now, is that okay? But I've really been loving playing the Hunchback with 9 medium lasers and just alpha striking that all day.
It's not what I gave the award to, but I agree with you. And, obviously I'm all for quirkage. And the heat scale one is a great start. I reckon they just need to go all out and introduce these other quirk types, particularly targeting maybe mechs that don't see as much of the battlefield these days. Great to see the Javelin, great to see the Hunchback. PGI, go hard. Let's see 10 different mechs get HSL or some other type. Let's see some new quirk types, like the Capn quirk, man. But go nuts, guys. Go nuts, and let's see some more of that kind of stuff.
Does definitely seem like an area where you can just kind of let your imagination run wild and just invent a whole bunch of other quirks that are along those lines like that. That spider quirk is a great example.
Gives you a reason to play it, eh?
And what about you? What was your favourite change?
Ooh, now my favourite change was the stealth change. So I thought that was awesome. And it's almost in the same vein we just talked about the quirk type and the fact that it gives you a reason to play that mech. I think what they did with stealth has given more of a reason to play those types of mechs, and given stealth a better distinction now. It's made it a distinctive ability that you can apply to mechs. And whilst you do see some heavies and assaults utilize it, it's almost like a quirk that's aimed at lights and the occasional medium. But the stealth fleas, the stealth pirate spains that we can play and that you see running around is awesome. I love it. I love that they can run around, shoot, harass, hassle, because it's encouraging a certain play style and a certain role. And I think that's a kick-ass thing to do. More and more of that stuff, I reckon. So yeah, stealth and heat definitely got my Alpha Strike award.
Oh yeah, I love that one too. And actually, leading up to this recording, I've been playing the stealth flea with Force Small Pulse and Mask, like almost only been playing that for the last few days. And I've had a really great time. Every minute you're so close to death, but I'm running stealth like 90% or more of the game. Occasionally need to pop it off to just cool down a little bit, but most of the time just got it on, and it's hilarious being in the middle of the enemy team and just shooting them all in the back, dropping airstrikes, popping UAVs. It's so by the seat of your pants, exciting gameplay. And then someone spots you and they all turn on you. You got to meep out of there.
I can confirm you are a pain in the ass in that mech from being on the other team. All right, man, let's get into from the good to the bad. You've called it the Salt Mines Award because there's certainly been a lot of salt that has been produced from these ones, and I suspect we're going to have the same thing for this one.
3, 2, 1.
Side torso destruction. Love it.
So you're in the heat of battle.
That's a good pun there, heat of battle. Yeah.
Yeah, in the heat of battle, firing away at your opponent, you're getting the upper hand, and then pop, your side torso goes off, and then pop, something else goes off, and then bam, bam, It doesn't matter what you do, you can pop a cool shot, you can shut down whatever you like. It's not going to save you. You're done for.
The reason for me that I didn't like it, and this is almost related to the things that we were saying about the good stuff. So the things that we were saying are good was because it gives some distinction. It makes mechs unique or makes a role unique. The side torso destruction, personally, I thought it's sucked ass because it's made brawling not as viable. So that's a play style for me as a potato. Brawling is a little bit easier skill wise to manage. Shoot, twist, and side torso destruction and using a dead side is a bit of a tactic, twisting and using your torsos as much as you can. But yeah, if you're riding the heat limit brawling and your torso pops, I don't think it helps brawling. So that's why, for me, it's toast. Get rid of it, I think.
Yeah, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't with it as well, because if you run, like I do, override on every game, unless I'm in a light mech, then you're going to blow something up a lot of the time before you can react. And if you don't run override, then you're just going to shut down right in front of someone.
I'm already rubbish at managing heat, so this doesn't help most skilled players like me.
You've already kind of covered in a tangential way my key problem with this, and that is I think players, generally speaking, should be rewarded for taking risks in this game. If you take the risk of closing to 100 meters of someone, there should be something to gain from doing that. There should be some benefit to brawling. It should be powerful once you get to there. If you don't reward risk taking, then you are by definition rewarding passive play or non-risk taking, and that gives us a stagnant state of play where everyone doesn't want to take any risk and is hanging back and firing from long range weapons and all that kind of stuff. And this change is really punishing people who take risks.
Yeah, that's a brilliant take, dude. I mean, that's the best thing that I've heard for why side torso destruction might need to be rolled back, is this ideology that you've talked about, or this philosophy towards rewarding risk, because that becomes a major way that you can influence play style. And it's the key problem with LRMs, right? I mean, let's not get into the weeds too much about it, but yeah, bang on. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, and I mean, its effect on the meta, I don't think people are going to really adjust their gameplay too much and try and keep their heat so low that they can handle that destruction. I don't see that happening. it's just not fun. I mean, riding the heat train, if you get it, if you click into it and you can just be just hitting 100 or 101% every time you shoot, it's so gratifying. And with override on, and it just punishing that skill. Hate it.
Yep, salt. All right, let's
So much salt.
go. Let's go from salt to what you've called the Little Detail Award. So this is another little Razzie style award. What is the thing that you thought was the best little detail?
The MechWarrior community are all very familiar with the concept of little details, and I think my favorite little detail of the year's got to be that refresh button that they put in. They're like, yeah, we've got a refresh button for the friends list, and then you click it, and absolutely nothing happens. It's like, well, nothing happens, but I feel better about it. I just love that someone went in there and, designed the little button, went in Photoshop and designed a little button, designed how it would look when you clicked it, would change appearance, and then somehow it made it into the game with absolutely no functionality at all. That part of it I can't really understand, but
Yeah, no, that was an epic fail, I think, on that front. Okay, my little detail award, my Razzie doesn't go for a change, it goes to a person. And my Razzie for the year for 2018 was the illustrious Bearclaw, who learned that perhaps if you're going to do silly things, that there could be repercussions to that. So a Razzie to Bearclaw for being a naughty little bear. And unfortunately, having to spend a bit of time on the sidelines. So yeah, just bit of a Razzie there, a bit of an epic fail. Bearclaw's attempt at being clever unfortunately fell a little bit short. So let's hope 2019 brings young Burr a little bit better luck and make sure that he's following the same guidelines and rules that the rest of us do.
Still in the naughty corner for now.
All right, so everyone, we hope that you've enjoyed our take on the changes that happened in 2018, and Cat's hard work and trawling through all those changes, I think, put us in a good position to have a different perspective on what those changes might mean, what the direction of the game is, how we thought those changes worked as a whole, and the direction and future of the game and what it might mean. So thanks for listening. Cat, was there anything else that you wanted to finish up with?
I want to say thank you very much to everyone who subscribed to us following our last podcast. So we're over 120 something subscribers at the moment, which is great. We've got a fancy custom URL on YouTube, and just everyone who's listening to us. I mean, this is, at least numerically, our 10th episode. So pretty proud of that. I hope you are too, Cousin.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's a blast. It's awesome, and again, my thank you as well to all the listeners and contributors out there. Congratulations to the winner of our giveaway. If you don't know who that is, then make sure to go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and check out the video which we will have posted there to announce the winner. So yeah, thank you to everyone. It's a great community. It's awesome to be a part of it. And we hope that the game does have a future so that we can keep on doing it. Awesome. All right. It's good talking to you again, man. And we'll catch you all out there on the battlefield.
07 MechWarriors.
If you did enjoy this content, then please consider supporting us. You can do this in a multitude of ways, including subscribing to our podcast on your favourite podcast platform and leaving reviews, as well as subscribing to us on YouTube and liking our videos. You can also support us by sending us feedback either through comments, tweets, or directly through email. Tweet and follow us on Twitter at IncomingP, or email us directly at incomingmissilepodcast@gmail.com. You can also support us directly by becoming a patron or sponsor. You can find us on Patreon at Incoming Missile Podcast and choose one of 3 tiers of support. Patrons not only get mentioned on the podcast and get access to exclusive content, but can even join us as a guest host on the podcast. You can also opt to sponsor an episode through one-off donations, all of which will be used as giveaways for our listeners. So if you had a product, service, or content that you'd like us to mention, contact us to discuss sponsoring an episode. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We look forward to hearing from you. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next time.